All right. Welcome, everyone, to Legal Innovation Spotlight LinkedIn Live Edition. I'm your host, Ted Theodoropoulos, and I'm the CEO of InfoDash. I am joined by Melissa Ballesteros, who with Holland Knight, who has a new title. And Melissa, why don't I let you introduce yourself so I don't get all that wrong since it's new?
No problem. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. Yes, I am now the manager of AI. Well, I will be actually a manager of AI on Monday and legal technology adoption.
Awesome.
Thank
And
you.
today we are going to talk about Copilot versus ChatGPT and Claude and really insert any frontier model out there that people might be using. For those that listen to the podcast and follow me on LinkedIn, they may know that I've been a little bit of a critic with Copilot. I think that Copilot is a useful tool, but when I look at the price point, and it seems like it's still evolving, which it is, and we know that. Um, I end up falling back a lot. I've had a Copilot license for almost a year and a half now, and I've tried dozens, if not hundreds, of use cases and had varying degrees of success. But Melissa has a whole arsenal of tips and tricks to really use Copilot in a very productive way. So we're going to talk through some of that stuff. But before we do, let's kind of set the stage a little bit. So with Copilot versus other tools, obviously the benefits of Copilot, it has access to most of your M365 data, not all. I've found that out just through trial and error. You can initiate prompts and issue commands directly from the native Microsoft interfaces like Word, Excel, the Edge browser, multiple places. And there's enterprise security built in, which even with some of the like the subscription tools that you pay for, like ChatGPT Pro, you don't actually get those same assurances like you do with Microsoft. So we're going to show you some of that today. And before we jump in, Melissa, why don't you tell us kind of your perspective on Copilot, its strengths and weaknesses, and kind of where it sits in your workflow?
Absolutely. Thank you. So let's start by saying that Copilot is not the easy button tool. And it's not going to fix all your problems, make you lose weight, and make you 10 inches taller. I wish, believe me, we would be in different places right now. However, it is your companion. And I just think that it has been positioned incorrectly in the way that it could do everything. It really can't. Like you said, it has limitations. But if we are able to use it to our advantage and to use it correctly, then we can get ahead. And the reality is that let's say you use ChatGPT, let's say you use Claude or any of the other ones. When you finish your interaction, we have text. And what do you do with that text? Once you have it ready to go, you have to make it into a Word document, into a PowerPoint presentation, into something. And that something is going to take you a long time. So if you just saved 2 or 3 hours of research time or whatever you're doing, well, you're going to spend it on formatting. And clearly that is what Copilot is meant to do. The things that you don't want to do, your client doesn't want to pay for, and that are not really your job, right? Attorneys, in my case, they are paid to be lawyers, but yet they spend time formatting, don't you? Don't I? Like everybody. And so there are just certain things that it's not worth for people to do. And it isn't that your assistant can't do it. Your assistant should be reviewing, helping. This is about being able to collectively do better work, not necessarily to do just what the outcome or whatever the model provides you.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And the reality is, I pivot back and forth between the frontier models as well. There's some things that I think Claude does well. Some things I think ChatGPT does well. Some things I'm quickly becoming a fan of Gemini. And I've found that Gemini has been successful where Claude and GPT have not. ChatGPT, an example of that is I took our customer list of law firms and put it in a spreadsheet. And I asked Claude and ChatGPT to fill in the AmLaw ranking for each of the firms. And both failed. I tried multiple attempts. I tried different formats. Like I ended up copying and pasting from Excel into the prompt itself, and it just wouldn't work. I went over to Gemini 2.5, and it worked the first time. So a lot of this is just kind of trial and error, feeling your way through the process. And I don't think there's just any one model that really fits the bill today. I think that you have to kind of feel your way through it, feel what works well, what doesn't. Also, when I build custom GPTs versus Claude projects, even though Claude has a bigger context window than ChatGPT, I have found that ChatGPT has more headroom for training documents. So, and if you look at the documentation, it's very unclear. In fact, with ChatGPT, it's actually incorrect. It says that there's a limit of 10 training documents. The limit is now, or was the last time I checked, 20, but I only found that out through trial and error. So these platforms are evolving so fast that the documentation isn't keeping up, and the documentation is very limited. With Claude, when I set up the equivalent of ChatGPT's, those are called Claude projects. With Claude projects, really limited headroom in training documents. And again, they don't give me a token limit. I can just tell when I do them side by side, I run out of room much, much faster with Claude. And I use Claude projects and custom GPTs quite often. So even within the frontier models, they have strengths and weaknesses. So we just kind of have to feel our way through. But, painting broad brushstrokes before we get into the demo, what do you use as a guide? Like I'm going to start with Copilot here versus I'm going to start with ChatGPT or Claude there.
Absolutely. So, first of all, I think that that's a great question that everybody should ask every single time we go to use an AI tool. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? Because not every tool is good for everything, right? And so I would say that find what is it that you do, because the other thing is they claim to be good for certain things. So let's say Claude is meant to be for coders, or it's really good at coding, but I use it for drafting and it works really well, right? But so does Copilot, and so does ChatGPT. And so the idea is that you use it enough in order to get confident that this is your assistant, because this is your assistant. In addition to that, we are getting to the point where these assistants are now going to have memory. And this is the future, like the end of this month. And this is when we're going to start building relationships with these tools. And at that point, it really becomes complicated to go back and forth between tools. So we're going to have to, at some point, whether we want to or not, decide who our companion really is. And so it isn't about just training your particular model, because it's not just that. It's about also us training ourselves in order to be able to interact with it in ways that make our life easy. And I will tell you that one of the biggest things that I've found so far is we are not used to losing our buttons, in our menus. Like, what? I have to tell it what to do? What do you mean? If I don't say make it pretty and quickly, it doesn't do it for me. Yeah, you kind of have to tell it what to do. And we have discovered that we have a communication issue. This is not just a model issue. So work on your prompting skills. Make sure that you are able to communicate precisely. For me, I use the goal, context, source, and expectations framework. It's, I think, one of the better ones. I mean, and there's obviously prompting types, if you're going to do one shot and, whatever, chain prompting and all that, but bears basic prompting, right? And figure out what works for you. What is the result you want? And try to think of the end goal first. And I will show you a very good example of that when we talk, when we go through the demo. But that really is the idea.
And we are supposed to be live on LinkedIn here. This is the first time that we've used Riverside as a platform for that. Historically, we've used StreamYard, and I'm not sure that it's broadcasting, but we're recording, and we will absolutely post this so everyone can get the information.
I understand. I had somebody making faces at me, and I thought they were just trying to be funny.
Yeah, no, I think that's the deal. Riverside is having some bumps in the road, but we're still recording, so this will.
Well, that's fine. No worries.
This will absolutely get pushed out. So why don't we jump into some demos? People love to see hands on the keyboard kind of stuff. I think you're going to start with document formatting.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about not just the formatting, but what we do with the output, right? So what I'm going to show you is, let me just set it up here so I can share my screen. What I'm going to show you is the output that was created by, and like I said, you have to figure out what works best for you, right? And so what that means in my case is I have a whole lot of problems trying to figure out how to get whatever I'm looking at, which looks really pretty, in Claude and ChatGPT and whatever. It doesn't really work okay, here we go. It doesn't really work when I bring in, hold on, here we are. Perfect. Okay, so now, can you see my screen?
I see your desktop.
Okay, that's perfect. You're going to see a Word document right now. Okay, so here's what's happening. I went ahead and ran a couple prompts. And that, after running the prompts, I ended up with my text. But I asked it to, and this is the key, I asked it to include the HTML tags to keep the word formatting.
And you're doing this where?
In Claude.
In Claude. So this is a custom solution built.
It's not a custom solution. This is what they have for like enterprise.
Right.
But here's the thing. You can do this in Claude and ChatGPT. You can do it anywhere, because what you're doing is when you ask it to include the HTML tags to make sure that you can keep the word formatting, then you bring the text in. So watch. I copy the output, boom, and I paste it. When I paste it, okay, I can use this to actually generate a Word document that has the formatting. Let me explain. Typically, what people will do is they'll want to use the output. So they copy and paste. And if I were to simply copy and paste without XML tags, then I end up with text that looks in many, 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 many ways. Let me show you. Okay. Like this, right? If I copy this and I paste it into a Word document, what do we end up with? Ooh. Something like this, right?
Yep.
Very different. Now, you can play around with this and you can say, replace and get rid of I can go through and say, okay, go ahead and replace this. and replace my pounds with a space and replace all of them. And so it does that, and then replace my double pounds with, again, a space and replace all of them. And so, yeah, we can do all of that, right? I mean, my asterisk, sorry. But that still leaves me with what? Text that I need to format. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
So instead, Word has what we call styles. And these styles can be used in order to format. And actually, Claude or ChatGPT or any of your other models will provide you with the tags that allow you to make sure that it knows that this would be bolded. That it knows that this would actually be one bullet, that it would be a list, and so forth. So if you save your documents, and you save those documents that contain the actual XML tags, then you are able to ask it to then say, you know what? It's no problem. I will do the formatting for you. So how do we do this? You reference a document. You start with a blank document. And not only do you do that for formatting, but you do that in general. Every time you're going to start, never use the copy paste text and then work in that document. Use it as a reference, because we're using generative AI. And what's generative AI? It generates text. It generates something out of something. It's not going to be very good at just recreating what you have right from that particular text, because it's creating it outside of it, like in a box, and it dumps it into your text like normal text, right? But if instead we say, please rewrite a document. And so if we have a document and we can decide which document it is, again, you can do any one of your documents as long as you decided that you're using the text that either a document that you save with those XML tags and reference it. And that's what I'm going to show you in a second, but I'm going to show you one first. Let's say I'm going to select this document and I'm going to ask it to use heading 1 for titles, use heading 2 for subtitles, because you can use titles and use, just that. Let's start with that. If I do that, it is going to generate the text using the formatting. So this is what you can do with current text that you already have, right?
So to be clear, you went to Claude, you asked it to output into HTML format, you save that as a source document in Word, then you opened another document that has styles defined, and you went to Copilot and basically did a mapping between, heading 1 in HTML and heading 1 in the Word doc. Is that accurate?
There's 2 different things that you can do. I'm going to show you both. I showed you the first one, which is the thing you can do right now with any of your documents. This is taking a minute, so let me go back real quick and let me explain. This particular thing that I'm doing right now is with any document that you have that looks like this. Let's just say that you didn't do anything with this. You simply went through and you left it when you pasted it, right? The original thing that we did, you left it like this, you save it as a document and you reference it. That's the first thing you can do, so that you can tell it to use the headings that are already here, because it understands that this is a heading 3 because it has 3 pounds, that this is bolded, that this is a heading 2 because it has 2 pounds, and that this is a heading 1 because it has 1 pound. And so the reason is the activity here, or the process, the workflow, is that you are actually going to tell Copilot what to use to replace this and rewrite it using the styles that are contained in a document. Now, this could be a blank document, or this could be a document that has your styles already that your marketing team loaded onto this, and boom, you have a publication that's done. However, if you want, you don't have to go that far. You simply can ask your friend Claude to do that for you. So let me explain. Let me just find you a one that's closed. That's really, there we go. Here we go. If I go in and I ask Claude to give me the XML tags for something, it's going to look like this, right? So rewrite what I asked you to do, but rewrite it I asked you to translate something. Rewrite it using XML tags. If I copy my XML tags, what that does is I can actually just, boom, rewrite this, and it already knows what the format is because the XML tags are put together. Does that make sense?
Interesting.
So those are your two things. If you already have documents that you've copied and pasted, or you didn't go through it, or you don't want to ask it to keep the XML tags, no problem. You don't have to. You can simply copy and paste it, but as long as you don't use that document to edit. So conversely here, after it's formatted, if I go through and I ask it to say, add something else, for example, I wanted to add an additional paragraph. Now keep in mind, I'm asking it in English and this is in Spanish, right? Add an additional paragraph and I tell it to do that. See what happens?
Yes.
The format gets completely destroyed because it isn't meant for that. It is not meant to write here. Copilot is not, it's already outside of the document. But if you actually give it a clean document to work with, like we did just now, then it can rewrite because it's generative AI. Make sense?
It does.
So that's one of the coolest things that I've found. And like I said, this isn't about Claude or ChatGPT or anything. It's about, again, what can you do to push that needle a little further and ask your assistant to give you exactly what you need. And in this case, using those XML tags is going to allow you to bring that together. And by the way, I'm not a genius. I actually didn't come up with that all on my own. One of my friends, an attorney, did so. And it's all about talking to people. AI is about community. What are you doing? What are you doing? Let's do this together. What can we do that works better for all of us? And then in that community building, you get to discovering things like this.
Yeah. So, and which is I'm assuming the preferred method is taking the raw HTML, putting it in a document, and then going into a document template that has styles and telling Copilot to translate from the source HTML and apply the styles, because then you can make edits. You have more flexibility. Is that right?
Exactly. And then what you're doing is, and if you don't like it, say, well, add another bullet or do this or do that. Then you can continue to iterate, but ask it to rewrite again and add this. Because if you just say add another bullet, it simply is adding one thing. So if I was to, do this all over again, for example, and let's say I'm going to start all over again and I'm going to ask Copilot to, it's not coming up. This is happening recently. Like my Copilot won't come up again. So let's say, here's this. Let me see. Okay. So it rewrites it. And all I did was put it in because this already had my XML tags. But if I don't like it, instead of accepting this right now, okay, then all I have to do is I need to stop sharing. Oops. I stopped sharing, didn't I?
Yeah.
Holy mother.
You meant to stop generating.
Yes,
Copilot.
I did. Let me do this again. And somehow my thing didn't stopped. I don't know. Let me go back to sharing one more time. This is so funny. I'm trying to share screen. Here we go. There we go. Tell me when you see it again, please.
There we go.
Okay, here we go. So let's try this again. What we did just now was we simply just created text, and we did this from the contents, the XML text, right? And if we do that, boom, it creates the text because we don't need to tell it to format. We simply, boom, put it there. If you don't like this, if you want it to change, if you want more, less, whatever it is, instead of stopping and then you doing it, so don't do Copilot's work for it, then you need to tell it what you want it to do. So if you want for it to,
Yeah, hide that. There you go.
There you go. So if you want for it to, let's say, write one more paragraph for each section. And if I do that, then it's going to write that one more paragraph for each section because I mentioned each one of the sections. But if I just ask it to add a paragraph on the first thing, it's going to add just, and it's like you have to make sure that if it doesn't do the full set, then ask it to. No, rewrite the whole thing and do this and do that and apply this style or that style if you don't like what it's doing. But then you start generating the content, and it is so much easier to do that. Then if you don't like this doesn't look great, so you can say style the additional paragraph using heading 2. And then it goes through and here's the additional style using heading 2. You can then say, use all paragraphs, heading 2, heading 3, whatever, you get the point. But the whole idea here is that we are specific. My prompt, apparently, it's just telling it to do the second paragraph, not the first one. So again, work to prompt your way to the result you want. And that is going to guarantee that you're able to provide better content because it's typo free, grammatically correct, and all it needs is your actual experience. And that is something that no LLM model or any other type of assistant with any other type of intelligence can do for you, not even those around you. And so it is important to recognize that we need to keep the human in the loop and that we are responsible for the content that these tools are providing. So regardless of where we're getting the content from, try to leverage on these tools. And Copilot is fantastic for building on to wherever you get that data from, because ultimately you're going to end up with a Microsoft document, right? Word, PowerPoint, or Excel, or any of those. So if instead of working off of the reference document or the copied and pasted text, you simply reference, you're going to get much further.
Yeah, and I've tried different paths with this. I've experienced the same situation. I have highlighted in the browser, instead of hitting the copy button, highlighted in the browser and pasted it into a Word document. And then what ends up happening is like bullets aren't actually bullets. So if you go to an end of a bulleted list and hit enter, then it doesn't always recognize that list, that preceding list, as a bulleted list. So painful. Another path I've taken is I've asked the Claude and ChatGPT to create a Word document and let me download it. When I do that, I get weird styles and, it just doesn't look right, and it's hard to work with. So this has been a huge source of frustration for me personally. And it sounds like what I need to be doing is telling the model to generate HTML, save that as a source Word document, go into Copilot, reference it, and then tell it to apply the styles from that document template.
You actually don't even need to tell it at that point. If you save it with the XML tags, all you need to do is rewrite it, and boom, it does it for you because the XML tags contain already the formatting. But if you already have the copied and pasted text, then you can save that as a reference and ask it to then rewrite using heading 1 for the titles, heading 2 for whatever, and then you can it will do that using the styles of the current document. If that is your normal template, then it'll use that. But if you already have a template, like I said, your marketing department, this is a blog that you create, for example, and it already has your templates, you can label those and you can ask for that to be used instead.
Okay. And then, all right, so let's move into like email management, because again, this is something that the, you know, off the shelf frontier models, they don't have access to your email, with the exception of Gemini. And I have not played, you know, our work email is Microsoft 365, just like 99% of big law firms, maybe even 100%. I've never seen a big law firm not use, you know, Exchange Online, but maybe there are some out there.
Mhm.
So with Copilot, I'll kind of highlight some challenges that I've had using Copilot for emails. The first one is that it doesn't sound like me. And yes, you can reference a style document in your prompts, but it doesn't remember. So you have to do it every time, unless that's changed recently. And if I were to send the emails, I'm kind of a really short typer, like very direct, not a lot of fluff and flowery language. So if I were to send an email that Copilot generated for me, my team would think I've been hacked, right? Because it sounds
You
nothing
ask
like me.
me all the time. Did Copilot write that for you?
Yeah, I
Yes,
do.
it did, Ted.
I totally call you out whenever I get emails from you. I'm like, did Copilot write this? But there are some real advantages, and you know how to leverage those advantages. A lot of us are feeling around in the dark, and frankly, I get frustrated and then just don't use it. So why don't we walk through some examples that you have on the email management side and learn how to do it correctly?
Absolutely. So let me begin by saying that, again, we need to start thinking about how we can leverage this and make it better than just the buttons that you can press, right? I feel like summarize is an overused button. And if you have Copilot, I'll show it to you in just a second. You will find that summarize is not all that. It's good if you just want to read through what is happening in an email. But if you need for other content to be generated, or if you are actually wanting to act on the actual email, then go to the email and start using Copilot to do that. I feel that wherever there's a button, people just click it. You know, oh my God, I can summarize. Thank you. Poof, I clicked it. And so 9 times out of 10, I said, okay, well, why did you click summarize? Well, because I'm going to send it over to my team in an email. I said, how about you ask it to create the email, including a summary? And isn't that what you want? So you don't do Copilot's work for it. It can handle it. You don't pay hourly.
Now, you pay monthly. So, all right, well, show us that. Yeah, I would like to see that.
I am going to show you, Ted. I'm happy you asked. So here we go. I am going to share my screen. Here we are. And so I am going to show you Copilot. If I can, for some odd reason, today is the day where, of course, my computer decides to do craziness. There we go. It came back. Here we are. Let me just go here. So I can ask it, this is Copilot, my work toggle. And that actually means that it is linked to my files, and I can go right in here, boom. Oop, that's not what I wanted. And I can ask it to do one of many things for me. One of the things that I've actually gotten for it to do is to answer my emails in a bulk way. And so the way to do that is something like, please reply, or please review all my unread emails and reply, or draft the reply. Draft a 1 paragraph reply for each one of them based on previous conversations and any other relevant information. Now, in addition to that, we want to narrow it down even more, and we want to say what unread email. So I can say for example, yesterday or whatever it is. So 424, whoops, there we go. 4/23/2025, and then boom, it starts to draft. And then it generates a list that you can use in order to boom, 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 answer all of this stuff. So let's say I'm going to go to the corporate run, and I can go into my email for the corporate run and answer it from there. That's one way, right? Now, let's talk about another cool way. And this is how you can do this with your individual emails. So how many times do you get an email and you have to answer the email? Now, it could be one, you need to generate new emails, new content. Totally fine. I'm going to show you that from right now. And sometimes those are contents that, emails that are difficult to generate, things that you don't want to say. And so instead of sitting down wondering, how am I going to say this? You can simply tell it what you're thinking. So I'll give you this. I had an email that is from a vendor, and they just want to talk to me. And you can probably imagine how excited I am to do that. So what I can do is, well, let's say that these people are actually linked to, one of my friends, and I really want to answer. So instead of going through and thinking about this, I can use my friend Copilot and I can draft. So without me even going, I can summarize. It'll give you the summary of the email. Great. Now you know what it's about. It's about offering me, for me to get a happy discount and all these other great things. So if I'm not interested, I can say I am not interested. Yes, I'm not interested. I don't want to meet. I am not the correct person. And cannot give you a new name. Okay, that's pretty bad, right? But it doesn't have to be. But that's really what I want to say. And so I can definitely go in here and say, you know what? Please use a nice, kind tone and make sure they think I care. Be professional and apologetic. Something like that. And so it's going to pick up all the information from the email. And here it goes. It picked up the name and it said, thank you so much. It was great meeting you, so forth, so on. I can keep it, or I can say regenerate one more time, or I can adjust it to make it longer, shorter, all that great stuff. But I can say, make it 30% shorter, for example, and it's going to do that. I can ask it to do that. I can say, redraft. And to your point of it doesn't sound like me, you can say, for example, redraft without saying, avoiding this, and that word. And it's just going to redraft. And when you like it, you keep it. And if this email is super important, then you can use coaching. Coaching is right here, coaching by Copilot. And that coaching is going to give you a tone, reader sentiment, and clarity suggestions. These suggestions you can choose to copy and paste, but it's not going to do that for you, at least not now, but I'm pretty sure it's coming. So anyway, you go through here, you decide what is important. And if it is, you copy and you paste. And if not, you're ready to send.
Awesome. So yeah, and this is one thing that ChatGPT and Claude can't do for you, right? It doesn't. The only way to do that is to copy the email text, paste it in, and frankly, if there's anything of a sensitive nature in there, that's a risk. So Copilot does have a unique advantage in this particular use case because A, it's right there, and B, you've got enterprise security around it, so there's no risk of compromising data or exposing data that you don't want to. Correct?
Exactly. But the other thing that is super important to keep in mind is also that you are making, there's no typos, there's no grammar, mistakes. It is pulling up the information, but you have to watch out to what it's doing, right? That's number one. But also keep in mind that when you're answering these emails, you are, and in this case, we were referencing even previous conversations, meetings, whatever. You can say, base this on the meeting we had last week about what, XYZ. So you are able to leverage the content in, the grid and access all of that. So long as you're using Copilot, you're using OneDrive in order to be that, mediator, if you would.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is OneDrive used to be a huge no-no in the law firm world. That has changed. I'm guessing it was Windows 11 that directs my documents to OneDrive that brought law firms to the table to reevaluate that. Let me ask you this. So law firms keep most of their, if not 100% of their work product, for example, in the DMS. It's not in OneDrive, right? Maybe you have some drafts or some working documents, but so that tells me that Copilot really makes sense in kind of business of law functions and communications, because Copilot does not have access to your DMS, where you can say, reference the last brief I wrote for this client and explain. Like, it can't do that because it doesn't have access to your DMS,
No,
correct?
well, I think will it ever, because everybody wants a piece of the pie, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that everybody needs to create their own AI. But to your point, at ILTA, I sit on two committees. So I talk to a lot of different law firms. And I'll tell you, I don't think that anybody really wants OneDrive as their DMS. And I don't think that's ever going to happen because of our security, client requirements, and so forth. But this is, again, positioned incorrectly. You need to use OneDrive as your transition, as the place where you can access between copilots. Keep in mind, Word is its own copilot, PowerPoint is its own copilot, right? Every single application has its own copilot. And the way that they connect between them is OneDrive. Right? That's your connector. And so if you are working on a document, if you are working on generating something, that reference lives in OneDrive. And therefore you can grab that raw data, that reference, and pull it from Copilot in PowerPoint, from Copilot in Word, from Copilot in OneNote, and so forth, to generate more content and leverage that original content. Because once it exists in a written format, you should never have to do it again. You should just leverage it to make it now an email, make it now an article, make it now, a PowerPoint presentation. Grab a PowerPoint, make it into an email. All those things that we can do, so long as they are somehow existent within OneDrive for the purposes of generating. But I don't think anybody is using it for anything else. I don't know that it would ever take off that way.
Yeah, no, I can tell you there have been multiple attempts. We're a share, InfoDash is a intranet extranet platform built on top of SharePoint. Nothing would make us happier to see law firms use SharePoint as a DMS, but it's big law. It's just not. It's not a good fit. It's just not. Law firms have tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of documents in their DMS, and getting that sort of data payload in and out of SharePoint is extremely difficult, painful, and like you said, the controls that clients require are sometimes there are gaps. What about prompting Copilot with bulk responses? So you started to go through that a little bit, but what if I wanted to? What if I don't use the web interface of Word? You know what I mean? So I use or Outlook. Like when you went into, you know, copilot.microsoft.com, toggle the work button, and then tell it to generate responses. Will it save those as drafts in your draft folder, or do you need to kind of do it the way you did?
Well, so that is just like any other prompt. The output is going to be saved as output for the prompt, but it's not going to generate files unless I save it as a loop component or unless I actually copy that and create it into a file, right? There used to be originally, Copilot had the option to download into a Word document or download into a PDF. I think it was PDF. I even forget now. But anyhow, that's long gone. I don't know if it's coming back, but it it is, it's just a different way to see it, I guess, or use it. The one thing I wanted to tell you though, and things that Copilot can't do anymore and other things can. So videos, YouTube videos. I don't know if you were ever if you were ever using that very much, but I am a big fan of when you can go to YouTube videos and leverage the content that's out there, not like reuse the video. No, no, no. So like, what does this say? How many, give me the key insights or whatever. And for the longest time, and Copilot can't do that anymore. However, Gemini can.
Yes, it can.
And so I think it's amazing because sometimes the pace at which people speak, right? And that's true for, say, even WhatsApp messages. I love it when people send me a voice message and it's like, "Hi, so I hope you're having a good day." So you can actually just ask it, "Listen, is this covering this? Does it have any information about that?" And I think that's a fantastic use of, in this case, Gemini. Hopefully Copilot gets back to that again.
Yeah, it's hard to tell how that's going to play out. I mean, Microsoft and Google compete fiercely, so hard to say how that situation unfolds. What about? I think one of the last things we're going to cover is availability scheduling, and I think you have a demo for us. Is that right?
So I actually, yes, I do, but for some reason, again, I don't know what's happening today. All my technology is going away.
Well, we can
And
talk through it.
we can just talk through it. I'll tell you,
Yeah.
listen, it's really weird, but somehow all my stuff it almost rebooted before. I don't know. Anyway, here's what's happened. Here's what I think is a great, great workflow. Because when you're using other technologies, you can use it in Copilot and you can ask it to go and find your availability, but don't do it in Copilot in the actual email. Because it is my belief, and I don't have any proof, I could be wrong on this, but it is my belief that when you are replying to an email, you can ask it to, for example, reply to Joe and provide instructions on how to do this. And it'll go out to the web and provide some instructions. But what you can't do is go and look for my availability and tell me if I'm available at this date on this time. I think it's kind of stuck on that email or the web piece, not your email, right? But if you go to copilot.microsoft.com, you can actually ask it to tell me if I am available, or tell me the next time that I am available for 30 minutes between this date and that date, using the month, day, year format. Okay. So that's one thing you can do. It isn't fabulous, but it's good. You could also reference an email and say, reply to this email, right, from the work tab, not from the email itself, and check my availability, especially where I've used it is when we're working with different time zones. So Joe is in California and I need to schedule a meeting with him. Please find the next 30 minutes within California time between this time and that time. It doesn't always do it, but it's done it a few times for me. So that's one of the things. But something else you can do. Claude is awesome at reading images, right?
Yes.
And so one of the ways that I've actually used it is I will take a screenshot of my agenda for the week. And if somebody sends me an email and says, "When are you available?" I am available on Tuesday between this day and that day, and Wednesday between this day and that day. I will load the picture of my agenda and say, "Please reply to this email based on my availability per the attached." And it is really good. And another thing that's really good at is and actually reading the request. I don't know if it happens to you when you say, "Oh, I'm available every day but Tuesday and Thursday." And the first reply is, "Oh yeah, Tuesday works great."
Right.
Right? So it actually reads the request for you and it goes through your agenda and it tells you whether or not you are available. So I think that this is, that's just another way of using it and using it to read images.
Yeah, I've had the same experience, and I will say that Microsoft still has a lot of work to do with Copilot and your calendar. So, some quick examples of dead ends or roadblocks I've hit, which I think are good for people to understand, what not to do in addition of what they should do, is I apply custom categories to my meetings so they get color coded, so I can look like all the podcasts I color in orange, and then the rest of the meetings I do like they're called the Covey quadrants. It's like important, urgent, important, not urgent, not urgent, not important. And it gives me, I can tell how proactive I'm being during a week. Well, it's nothing complicated. I just set up custom categories in Outlook. But if you go into Copilot and ask it, say, hey, tell me how, summarize my week by the custom categories of the items on my calendar, can't do it. It can't see the custom categories. What it tries to do is it reads the title of each one and tries to create its own categories, which isn't helpful. So I've also done things like where Copilot has run into a brick wall. I've said, like, I block time on my calendar for, I call it thought leadership, but sometimes it's just so I have a break, right? Like for lunch. And I would do it 3 times a day, 5 days a week. So I would have 15 on my calendar. So I went into the Outlook Copilot interface and said, how many meetings do I have on my calendar this week for thought leadership? And it said 12. Well, the answer was 15. So I tried to trick it and I said, actually, I have 9. And it goes, oh, you do have 9. And I'm like, what the? So, and then I took a screenshot of it and I went and pasted it in ChatGPT and Claude and asked it the exact same question with the exact same prompt, and it got it right. So I think Microsoft still has some work to do on that front.
I don't disagree with you, but I also, why do you want to know how many you have? I mean, come on.
Well,
But here, I mean, and I was being facetious about that, but my point to it is, I believe that it is positioned incorrectly. It isn't a math tool. It isn't meant to count your meetings. It is meant to reply to your emails. It is meant to produce content. It is meant to recreate content. And it is meant to leverage the actual tools that it is living in, like Word, PowerPoint, and all that. So better use of it is to go in and, create PowerPoint presentations, insert pictures into that, things that you cannot do in, say, ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other models. And so I think that if we are able to leverage what each tool can do, you're never going to have just one. I mean, you don't have one just now anyway. In order to work with anybody, you need to know Word and PowerPoint and Outlook. And we don't have one tool. So the world is not changing. It's changing a lot, but we still need a lot of tools. So
yeah. What about PowerPoint presentations? That's somewhere else I've had challenges and Carolyn Humphreys with Traveling Coaches, she gave me some good guidance that did help. But for people who just come in and try and use it, had a Word document and reference the Word document with an outline for my presentation and tell Copilot to create it. It looks like my 10-year-old put it together, just not good, right? Like I could write a macro. It's not helpful to just take content from a Word doc and paste it into slides in a deck and have some basic clip art. So
it used to do that before.
yeah, well, there's other tools out there, like Gamma.
Document as a Word, you could save a Word document as a PowerPoint or whatever it was.
Oh, can you do that?
I think you could before, or the other way around. But what I'm saying is that's not magic. But see, you mentioned something really important. And I bet you hit that little button where it says make a presentation out of this file. Again with the buttons. Stop hitting the buttons. Tell it what you want. So instead, if you would have said, I am attaching an outline of a presentation I would like. I am presenting for a group of 10, 15, 20 people, all experienced in this particular topic. I need to make 2 key points. I have 30 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Make the images modern, make the images clear, using natural lighting, make sure that it is refreshing. Their brand colors are green and yellow. Focus on those colors. You understand where I'm going at? with
Hmm.
this, right? And so if we are able to translate what our brains are already expecting, because that's the thing, nobody wants anything, we expect it. And so the more surprised you are by its results, the worse your prompt was. And if we keep hitting buttons, we are not going to get anywhere. So that's where prompting libraries become crucial, so that people that have no idea what they want can actually get an idea and spark some interest and maybe create their own. And that's when sharing and community, again, back to the same thing, makes a huge difference. When I find a prompt that I love, I can share it with you and you and you. And so we can all be better and leverage the tool in the best way that it works, not the best way we want it to work.
Yeah, the feedback I would give Microsoft, stop putting the buttons everywhere. Like they're everywhere. Like they're even building a new keyboard layout that hasn't happened in like 30 years so they can put a Copilot button. It's like, all right, if you don't want people to click buttons, stop putting the buttons everywhere.
Well, but people want the buttons. That's the thing. It's comforting, right? People are freaking out and people are not using it. Like you said, you know what? It doesn't work, so I don't use it. People are not adopting it because they don't know how to talk to it. It isn't Google. You're not speaking, it isn't 2 + 4, hit enter, -1, enter. No. This is like speaking to people, but it looks like a Google. Connor Grennan. Listen to his spiel. That's not my genius, that's his. But I can tell you, he's the only person that I was able to say, "Oh my God, you put the dots together." Yes, that's what this is about. It is about a mind shift. It is about using something that we've never used before and making it part of our daily activities, our hour by hour tasks.
So, well, we're coming up on time. This has been super helpful. And I think a lot of folks out there have struggled like me. And if anything else, like a key lesson out of this for me personally is getting rich text from the frontier models into a Word document productively and efficiently. Like that is a real struggle for a lot of people. And like all the tricks I tried, like copying, like highlighting the text in the browser, copying and pasting, limitations with that. If you hit the copy button, it comes over with the pound signs and the asterisks. That doesn't work great, but I really like your trick with you saving it as a source document with the HTML tags and then importing it into a new document and letting it map the styles. I think that was a key takeaway for me.
Yeah, and I did XML tags, and I did also I use its own coding that it uses, those asterisks and pounds. If you already have that, if somebody sent you that, you can input that into the model and say, spit it out using XML tags, so I don't lose the word formatting. That's one way. But you can also simply use it leveraging those, because those are already tags. So you can say replace 1 pound with level 1 style, 2 pounds with level 2, and so forth. So it's all about leveraging what you have and using what is in existence, like Word and styles.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and spending some time and bringing your passion, which you're very passionate, which makes you a great teacher. And what resources you mentioned, Connor Grennan? I'm a big fan. I follow him and Ethan Malik on LinkedIn, and I get a ton of good, and Ali Miller. What are any other resources that people might tap into? Is Copilot Academy good? Have you delved into that?
Yeah, I have, and it's good. I think all the Microsoft content is great. I think that you need to find what your niche is. And so I would say go out to YouTube and search for whatever the workflow you're trying to find. Or say, for example, AI for real estate attorneys, AI for nurses, AI for whatever, and find people that are actually, because the information is out there. I think for legal resources, which is what I do, for training, which is also, for adoption, right? There is a ton of different people. I go back to my MVPs. Femca is a great resource. She's connected me with a bunch of people. There is, of course, we have Donna Sarkar. I mean, there's different levels, right, of complexity, I guess. But just forget about what I say. Go in and do your research and ask for whatever you're trying to do, and somebody is posting your workflow. I promise you.
I agree. I get it. That's my standard approach. I go out there and find it. Okay, well, this has been super helpful, and I'm sure we're going to do more of these down the road. And I would love to have you back, and we can dive deeper. And as the tool changes and evolves, and we want to tap into new use cases, we can do that down the road.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, you have a good rest of your day.
You too.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care.